Thanks to all the doctors, competition organizers, and DJs who came together to make this episode possible. Without you, we wouldn't really be able to understand the true impacts of COVID-19. First up, the doctors.
Sure, I'm Sumit Jindal. I am in my last year of ophthalmology residency in Virginia, and I have danced with KPGD, FCB, and hopefully my Bhangra career isn't over yet.
Hey, I'm Sean Gupta. I'm a first-year internal medicine resident in New Jersey, and I danced with CMU Bhangra and FCB.
Hey, my name's Ajay Kanakamatala. I'm a third-year orthopedic surgery resident at NYU. I danced with WashU Bhangra and FCB, and I can also be seen dancing in the East Village local and Lower East Side at local bars.
All right, so the big reason we pulled everyone together to have this conversation is currently the Bhangra circuit, and actually a lot of competitive dance circuits and professional leagues are getting impacted by COVID. There's been a lot of questions specifically around, is the Bhangra season going to happen? And if it does happen, in what shape or form is it going to take place in? One of the big things that I think a lot of people have a lot of questions around and are very uncertain about is, what specifically is COVID-19?
Yeah. So the thing is it's a tough question to actually answer, to be honest, because there's still so much we don't know about it. But COVID-19 is a respiratory virus. I think we all know by now it originated in China, but it's a virus that's actually been around for a long time. It just didn't receive a ton of attention because it was pretty rare to get. And you hear about all the typical symptoms of loss of taste, loss of smell, congestion, sore throat, fevers, headaches, coughing. These are like the typical symptoms of COVID-19, which really doesn't differentiate it that much from other respiratory viruses, even like the common cold or the flu. I think the big thing that differentiates it is the fact that we don't have any good treatment for it and we don't have a vaccine for it. So that makes it much more infectious at this point. That's, in my opinion, the biggest difference is just the lack of vaccine and lack of treatment, lack of studies that show that, treatment X, Y, and Z works. Until we get that, COVID-19 is still going to be a pretty big deal relative to some of the more common things that we see seasonally.
Yeah, and Samith and Ajay, I know you guys have been working with COVID patients directly or indirectly. When you get COVID, what happens to your body?
So I think one of the big distinguishing things that's made COVID maybe more of an issue in terms of transmission is the fact that its incubation period, it varies, can be anywhere from 2 to 10 days, but on average it's supposed to be around 5 days, and that's longer than other things like the flu and the common cold. And that's the issues right now, is we're realizing that a lot of people can be asymptomatic spreaders of it, and so it makes it much harder to contain it. That's one thing that kind of really distinguishes it from things like the flu and the cold that made it a bigger issue. In terms of other symptoms that have made it an issue, one thing that we're realizing is that it's more of it affects your lower respiratory tract, meaning your lungs, more so than things like the common cold, which we consider more like upper respiratory issues and viruses. And that's another issue with COVID, is that it's causing more lower respiratory symptoms, things like pneumonia that have proven tougher to treat. In addition to what you mentioned, cough, everything that Sean mentioned is, I'd say, pretty much the main symptoms. But in its most severe form, it can cause respiratory failure.
Samith, is COVID necessarily the issue itself, or is it more so like what comes after it? There's a lot of stories about how like COVID is not necessarily as different as the flu, but it's also in some cases it's deadly, and also it weakens the immune system to a point where other things that happen to the body cause you to potentially have fatal consequences. Is that the best way of thinking about it? Or
yeah, I mean, I think what a lot of the studying is going into seeing what like the lasting effects of it are, and I think that's another thing that makes it unique from, say, the cold or most strains of the flu, is that you're not seeing down the road effects from it, or long-term effects, damage done to your lungs from it, or kidneys and other parts of your body. And it looks like, for some reason or another, COVID might be starting some sort of an inflammatory response and like a prolonged autoimmune kind of response that's leading to scarring in your lungs. And but whether that's because, it's something that's tough to recognize early on and treat early on and prevent that from happening, versus something that's purely unique that it does that no other virus that we encounter commonly does, is I'm not really sure about.
You talked about being asymptomatic. How do you contract COVID? Like, what are specific ways that someone could get exposed and get infected?
So there's a lot of research that's still being done on it, but with respiratory viruses, there's kind of two main things that we think about. There's droplets and then there's aerosols. Aerosols are typically smaller and have the potential to stay airborne for longer. And one of the controversies around COVID has been, is it just spread via droplets? And meaning that, droplets, because they're so large, they don't really, when you cough, they more or less immediately fall to the ground. And so it's not like they hang around in the air, as opposed to aerosols, which if they can become airborne, can hang around in the air for minutes to hours after someone, coughs or does anything that aerosolizes. And it's not really fully understood yet the extent to which COVID is airborne. But right now, what people are thinking is it's a couple ways. It's droplets that can both be on surfaces, or if you obviously cough directly into someone, but then there might be some extent to which it's airborne, meaning they might be able to hang around in the air for a little bit. Now, the extent to which you can do that, again, it's not really well known, and that's why there's so much controversy over a lot of things.
Sean or Sumit, anything you want to add there?
Not on that point, but I do want to add just one thing to the last question you asked about long-term effects. So one of the other things that COVID can present with is a hypercoagulable state, which is a propensity to develop clots. That's not really something that we generally see with other respiratory illnesses. And that's what makes it, another wrench in how to treat it. So that can lead to like decreased perfusion to different organs and can lead to like organ failure.
When you say decreased perfusion to other organs, what does that mean? What's perfusion mean?
Basically, you're not getting the blood flow. So each organ of the body requires, you need blood flow to get there that carries nutrients, it carries oxygen. So when you don't have consistently good blood flow to those areas, they can become damaged. And they can, start functioning suboptimally. So that's one of the things that researchers are kind of seeing with COVID now as well, is that it's creating this state of low perfusion to different organs. So then, a disease that we think of as maybe just being more respiratory is now moving its effects to other parts of the body. And that makes it even more difficult to treat, because now you're treating more than just the lungs.
What are some potential after effects or downstream things that you guys are seeing?
It's a really good point. I actually had one case where we had a patient who they had COVID and they actually basically had developed a clot in their subclavian artery, which is that artery is more or less around the clavicle area, and blood has to go through there to get to their arm, and they actually ended up requiring an amputation. Basically, their arm died without blood supply, and that we ended up having to do an amputation.
I've seen some few just like anecdotal things from patients where they again were never symptomatic, but they tested positive. And, the younger, healthier patients who, like, I had one patient who was like maybe training for a half marathon or a marathon or something. They said that like for the 2 months after that, like never had the same aerobic capacity as before. And it's like their VO2 max just tested as a lot lower. And I've seen a couple of papers about how COVID could potentially be affecting like the efficiency of your mitochondria, and there's some like uncoupling going on there that's potentially contributing to that. But I think there also could be a chance that you could still have like a low-grade inflammation in your lungs that's causing like structural changes that could be leading to this, but you may never have actually felt, full-blown symptoms or even minor symptoms.
What are some of the interventions that we need to put in place to ensure, going back to capacity, auditoriums, or when it comes to sporting events, that would be effective today?
Well, I think it's, it's a lot of the same stuff that we've been talking about for, the last 6 months, which is wearing masks and being social distancing. So, the WHO recommendation is to distance at 1 meter, which is 3 feet. The CDC says 2 meters, which is 6 feet. So social distancing, masks, hand washing, avoiding large gatherings. The thing is like without really understanding like the pathophysiology of this disease, without having proper treatment, the only thing we can do is like what's called primary prevention, which is like preventing ourselves from getting the disease at all. So, that's the only way we can really like contain it, because we don't have any medications. We don't have, FDA approved medications and an FDA approved vaccine to treat it after we get infected. So we have to just prevent ourselves from getting infected. And unfortunately, that's like all the things that no one wants to do. Wear a mask, stay home, socially distance, no large gatherings.
Just to piggyback on a couple things there, and I think it's important for people to realize that even when we have a vaccine, I think people think about the vaccine as being, okay, once we have the vaccine, all the problems are going to be solved. But there's going to be just a whole new series of problems. I mean, I think that there was a survey, and of course every survey you take with a grain of salt, but there was a survey asking Americans, would you take a vaccine if it was available? And only like 30 to 50% of people said they would even take the vaccine. And so even once we have a vaccine, just, there's probably going to be a lot of people that, don't want to take it. And the other thing to recognize, I think, is that people, the term herd immunity gets thrown around a lot, and people think, oh, okay, well, aren't we going to get close to herd immunity? Not only are we very far, but just to put things into perspective, I think roughly there's been about 8 million positive COVID tests in the U.S., which is a small fraction of the population, less than 1%. And to get what epidemiologists think about as herd immunity, you need to have 90 to 95% of people need to be immune. So we're like at 1%, at most maybe 0.5 to 1% versus we need to get to 90%. So we're extremely far from herd immunity. And so I think that it's just important to realize that this is not something that's just going to be solved overnight with the vaccine.
And if the vaccine even works in the first place. Most people get flu vaccines almost every year, and there are multiple years where the flu vaccine, they just come out at the end of it and be like, hey, it just didn't take this year, or like it was made for the wrong strains, or for one reason or another, or if your body might not develop all the right immune response to a vaccine to make it effective in the first place. So when this first, version 1.0 of the vaccine comes out, there's no guarantee that even if everyone got the vaccine, that it would just shut down spread of the virus for good.
Would you dance right now in the current environment? Would you compete? Would you dance for fun? Like, where would you draw the line when it comes to your Bhangra involvement?
I still think it's probably a little too soon, and that's not just for my own sake. I mean, I think that just the fact that I think as a responsible citizen, I think that's one of the big reasons I would say that it makes sense to hold off on competing at this time. I mean, I think it's probably reasonable if you want to have practices, with your teammates. I think that's actually probably starting to be more reasonable now, especially if you're able to do it outdoors. But I think that just from a responsible citizen standpoint, it's probably still, I wouldn't want to be wouldn't want to, attend a competition for that reason.
I mean, I think it also depends on say where you're going for the competition. Are you driving to this place, or is your entire team having to go into an airport and stuff to get to this, wherever you're competing? People are in a lot of places are starting to go out again, or there might be in a workplace where they're around tons of people as it is. So I don't really see how a competition itself, performing on stage in an auditorium, would necessarily put you at more risk than going out to eat or going to a bar right now, especially in the States where things have gotten a little more lax. But I think the whole process of getting there and coming back is what makes it a little tougher.
Yeah, I think, I agree with both these guys. I think they bring up really good points. And I think when you're dancing, expending a lot of energy, sweating, you're yelling, whether it be at practice or at a competition, people in the crowd yelling, this is the best way to spread respiratory droplets, having your mouth open for an 8-minute set, I don't think I would attend a competition right now as an audience member or as a dancer. And I think it would be pretty difficult to get people to adhere to all the safety regulations that a responsible competition would want to put in place, including having everyone get tested beforehand. I think it would be tough to coordinate.
Next up, We have champs and legends.
All right. Hi, my name is Buckeye. I'm one of the current directors of Legends for 2020-2021 season. I was a former director of NDC for 2 years, National Cleveland. I also danced on Spartan Bhangra in the Bhangra circuit for 4 years in my time at Case. Through my time at Legends now, we have also partnered with eFusion, and that's one of the main initiatives that we're doing during this virtual season.
Hey everyone, my name is Kuntal Shah. I am a director of championships at Bhangra. Have been around on the circuit for a long time. Started in 2008. Ram and I have been on the circuit for a long time together. So yeah, here to talk about whatever Ram wants to ask me.
I'm really glad that this is it started off on this foot. I mean, I think I've talked to both of you guys, right? I talked to actually both of you guys within days of each other, so it just made sense to have this be a one call back in July. And I guess I want to start off by saying, back in July, we talked about what the forecasted dance seasons were going to look like, both in Fusion, in Bhangra. How have things changed since July up until now, and kind of what's happened from your perspectives, both of you guys being directors of kind of the championship competitions within Bhangra and Fusion respectively? And Amog, we'll start off with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think back in July, a lot more comps and teams were optimistic that we'd be back to more normalcy in the spring and able to have in-person competitions. But I think from them till now, we've seen majority of the comps cancel or shift completely to virtual format. That just reflecting the current scene of COVID, and that it doesn't seem to be letting up, and it's about the same that it was back then. We're still waiting on the vaccine development and seeing what's happening with that. But as of now, it does not look feasible to have any infeasible competitions in the spring.
Konto, what about you? What have been some big developments on the Bhangra side?
It's more of lack of developments. Kind of same situation. I think we were all, or at least many of us were optimistic in July when we last spoke that maybe things would get better, or, we were just optimistic. I think at that point I had told you, Ram, that I was thinking probably 6 months past a vaccine would be the first time we would see a comp try to host a live show again. And here we are, what is this, end of October with, no vaccine yet. So that pushes us, if we were to, follow my 6-month projection with, trusting my random projection, that still puts us already at next summer with no comps happening. So, Bhangra has done their first show online. They're round 1 at this point, and I think it went really well. They had, I think, like 400 people on the show, and
I heard the MCs were great.
MCs were great. I actually got to judge round 1, so that was fun as well. It was an interesting experience, but I think it went well. So, that's kind of laid the groundwork for what's coming in the next, at least for the rest of this season, in my opinion. The other things, there's been fluctuations with COVID cases and changes in restrictions, state to state or even country to country. In the summer, I think things were looking better in Canada, so academies started to reopen. What I'm hearing now is that most of them have been shut back down. So that's kind of the case around most of the circuit right now. So between academies not really being active in person and teams unable to travel country to country or state to state, our circuit's kind of just on hold and waiting to see what happens. So, we'll just have to hope that these online virtual comps hold us over and see what happens after that.
So, Amog, when we last chatted, there was a lot of conversation amongst, it seemed like the Fusion competitions about what the path forward was going to be. And I know Legends wasn't kind of dictating, but more kind of fostering the collaboration and communication. Mm-hmm. How would you say that has continued from July up until now, and,
so
and
we
what's the
actually came out with
relationship
the
like between
statement,
the
I think
specific
a few weeks after we
competitions?
talked, or mid-August, early September, I don't remember now, but basically saying that Legends will not be partnering with any in-person competition this whole season, basically not having partner competitions, which is basically the whole regular season that Legends hosts and how teams qualify to Legends. So that was canceled, and we let all our competitions know. From then, competitions have still been active in the group meet. We had another call just talking about other initiative ideas, way to program virtually in this time, what other initiatives competitions can work on. And I know there are a lot of state specific group meets being made. I know like in Ohio, although Ohio competitions have been in touch with each other, figuring out what initiatives they can work on and even collaborate on together. I know NDC and Midwest and Buckeye have been working a little bit together. The directors have been in touch, things like that. And our group is just open for any questions. If they need any support or reach, we're happy to help them out. Some competitions have gone virtual. There's a virtual competition group meet that's been made. So they had a call as well, organizing how virtual competitions would play out, what their ideas or different formats for that. So that's ongoing. Basically, it's just a community support, everyone just helping each other out what they can do.
Yeah. Konto, kind of similar vein, what are the thoughts right now within the Bhangra circuit with some of the conversations you've been having, and also, potential for hosting like a championship competition at the end of the year?
Hang on, I'm letting my dog stop barking before I answer. All right. I kept in touch with a few comps over the summer, at least fall comps, to see what was going to happen and what their plans were. The two big comps that happen in the fall normally on the East Coast are Burgh and Boston. Boston had announced that they were going virtual. I think they were having a lot of great interest, and however, they recently pushed their date to the end of April because I think teams were unable to get together to practice and whatnot. Burgh had announced also at the beginning of their fall semester that they were going to do a virtual show most likely as well. And now that has shifted from a competition to a showcase. So they're not even having any judging or anything. So while those are two major comps, two of the longest lasting comps on our circuit, who are trying to maneuver the situation. But they, at this point, in order to continue what they do and not skip a year, Boston's just pushing it to later in the season, and Burgh is doing this showcase thing. So I'm not sure about many other comps. I know AKD, I'm pretty sure, has canceled, and I don't know if there's any West Coast comps that we're planning to do a fall show, but as far as I know, there's no competitions, at least in the next 4 months, that are being planned, besides the online ones.
Got it. Moog, when you talked about that announcement that was put out, what all went into that conversation, and who all did you contact before coming to that conclusion?
It was a lot of talking with the comps and teams, like we talked about before, just continue to gathering feedback from them. And the more that we talked to them and just knowing the people on the circuit and the competitions, it seemed more and more unlikely that the comps themselves would be able to host in person, and teams gather in groups to meet together. And then talking amongst ourselves, me, my co-director, and the steering support that we have, it didn't seem responsible or safe for us to condone comps to be hosting virtually or partnering with them even through like January through March, or even a delayed season, because we didn't know what's happening with COVID vaccine development. We have a couple of people who are in tune with the pharmaceutical industry and the vaccine timeline, the delivery, and just hearing the timeline for the development and then the recovery period from the pandemic, even after vaccine distribution. It doesn't seem until mid 2021 until we can resume anything back in person normally as we've had before. And even then, it's still a long recovery back from there. So just looking at all those facts and discussions internally, we thought it'd be best to release that decision sooner rather than later. So then all these comps and teams could start planning for what they would like to do instead. Because as soon as we made that decision, we saw a lot of competitions cancel immediately. So we were also under the belief that comps were, even though we had told them not to look towards us for guidance, they were waiting on us to make a decision before making their own decisions, if that makes sense.
And so, just to get a better sense from both of you, I know you guys both have a pretty good pulse on the respective circuits. How many competitions are not, like, what percent change are we going from? So let's say, like, last year there were 40 competitions, right? And this year there are potentially like 20 competitions or 10 competitions of virtual format. What's like that attrition rate that we're looking at in terms of both competitive circuits?
We have 15 competitions who currently said that they will be going virtual, 18 competitions who have announced that they will be on a hiatus, and another 19 competitions that we have not that have not posted anything or updated the competition tracker that we have sent out to everyone. So it's about a third in each category.
Konto, what about you?
I honestly don't have a real answer for that. The only comps that are really pressured to make those decisions and publicize them are probably the ones that are university affiliated, because of their funding and because of just the fact that they have limited time to decide if they're doing a comp or not. Whereas you see a lot of independent comps that could take a year off whenever they wanted to, and many comps have done that. Many independent comps have done that. So I think those comps are probably in the same boat as champs and just waiting it out, versus like a Burgh has already decided what they're doing. I'm sure Mela has already decided or is close to a decision on what they're doing. Blowout is probably close to their decision as well. So these the collegiate comps are the ones I think that will publicize it.
Speaking of collegiate comps, here are some collegiate competitions.
Cool. I guess I'll start. So yeah, my name is Storage Nair. I am a fifth year graduating this semester from Carnegie Mellon, majoring in statistics and machine learning. I've been a part of Bhangra and the Burgh for 4 years now. I started off as a liaison my sophomore year, and then was a liaison chair, then registration chair, and now co-director. So just really excited to see how Burgh has changed over the years.
Yeah, and my name is Neha Sridhar. I am currently a senior studying computer science, graduating next semester from Carnegie Mellon. I've been involved with Bhangra and the Burgh for 4 years as well. My freshman and sophomore year, I was a liaison. Last year, I was our tech ops chair, and this year, I'm co-director.
So my name is Nisha. I'm one of the directors this year. This will be my third year on board, and I'm going to be a senior this year.
My name is Anushka. I am also a senior, and this is also my third year on board, and I'm a director as well.
So hey, we're here talking about BIB. There's been a lot of change because of COVID specifically and COVID impacts. Talk us through kind of what led you to switching BIB into this virtual showcase.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and keep it not as long-winded as it could be in this answer, but essentially, we ended last year abruptly. Everyone ended last year very abruptly, and as a board, we kind of we had elected me and Neha and Ishi as our co-directors, and we had this conversation that we always wanted to have the competition. We had not known the extent of Rona at that time, back in March when it was full. It had just started to spread, and so again, essentially, we were just kind of hoping that at some point, by the end of the summer, starting of the next year, things would die down and we would be able to have the competition as normal, with maybe some enhanced safety protocols, but that's all we really needed. And then, it just persisted. So we've been going through the entire summer and just realized that it's much more severe than what was initially thought of. And by August or so, we're having legitimate conversations at that point about, the state of the competition, what is our shot of making November happen. And we just realized that very realistically, the best shot that we have based on protocols from CMU, protocols from Pittsburgh, the best shot that we have is moving this to a spot in the spring. So we worked with our other neighboring competitions here in Pittsburgh and chose our date of February 13th. And from there, the decision was still not done yet to become a virtual competition yet. We had still been in person at that time. And from there, we went on to just think about like Burgh as the competition goes with safety and comfort within our own board and comfort with people outside as well. And we just realized that with safety protocols and everything necessary, the spread was too big. We couldn't really make our own bubble, even though we came up with a trillion rules that we could have implemented to try and keep it as contained as possible. The spread was just like the reach was just too broad for us to say that it was safe. So we decided to go virtual from there. And in terms of making it a showcase over a competition, we basically had this conversation about like what makes Burgh special. And from there, we felt that along with obviously the competitive team aspect from it, we thought Burgh's atmosphere and environment was what made Burgh so special. Whether it was Pittsburgh, the venue, the stage, we've had teams come to our competition and talk to their own teams about like through their pep talks and stuff and say that we made it. We were able to perform on the Burgh stage and stuff. And that kind of element is lost in a virtual setting inherently because you're just not there anymore. And we felt that while teams can really enjoy Burgh and from a competition aspect in terms of the e-bunker is going on right now and you guys are doing a great job, we felt that Burgh loses what makes Burgh by going in a virtual competition route for us. So we decided instead of going that competition route, we'll make it an open platform. We'll take it as a showcase. We'll say we'll allow teams, we'll give access to teams from across the world, nationally, internationally, to showcase what they've been up to during this time. Teams are still dancing, and we decided we think that's the best platform for teams to really just showcase and not have that pressure of a competition atmosphere, and rather Burgh can just celebrate Bhangra with all of them. And that was something that was done. We had made this decision around about more than half a month ago. And the entire time until our recent declaration on Instagram and stuff was basically us finalizing the rules and understanding registration, how it would go down, and the logistics and all those things.
One of the things I wanted to talk about and hone in on is you specifically mentioned earlier, you're following kind of the Carnegie Mellon policies, right? And some of the policies that were probably set up by the state and local governments. Could you walk us through who gets involved in the decision making? Who do you end up talking to? And then what kind of conversations need to continuously be had?
Yeah, definitely. So one of our main points of contact was our student life office, and we have a really amazing advisor there who kind of helps us with everything when it comes to finances, logistics, anything. And she helps us book our rooms around campus and communicate with our venue. When we were talking to her over the summer, even when we were planning on having our fall competition, even then she was very strongly advising against it, just because CMU had not even put out their protocols until I'd say early August. So we really didn't know what was going on. We didn't even know what was going on with the semester. So we really had to kind of plan out every single possible way that we could run this competition, what it became. So we had basically 4 different venues. We were either going to go an in-person competition with no audience, some kind of event that we would hold, whether that be in person or online, or just not have anything at all. And weighing all of those decisions with our own board after they were selected, the past co-directors of BIB from 13 and even consulting other competitions in Pittsburgh, as well as other Bhangra competitions in the area, like Mela and NDC. We were in constant communication with as many people as we could to see what our options were, what other people were planning on doing, so we could kind of make the most informed decision for us. And given everything that CMU had come out with, it seemed okay, they were following mostly Pittsburgh guidelines, which at the time were no more than 25 people in a single room. And that included soldiers and sailors, where you could not have 25 people, which is the size of our board. So we really couldn't even have that event in that space. And that obviously is very disappointing, but we didn't want to lose what Burgh was when we were going through all that consultation with our advisors from CMU and just everyone else that we had on hand.
How did you guys feel knowing there was that level of uncertainty, and did that ultimately push you towards kind of this path that you chose with the virtual showcase?
Yeah, we really were advocating for an in-person competition as much as we could, whether that be an in-person competition with no audience, because we had no idea what was going on, neither did they. So as much as she was I don't see it happening, we were really waiting to the last minute until CMU told us anything that would say a hard no. everything that we had been doing was pushing towards an in-person competition. So logistics wise, it was just a lot of constant communication with everyone that we had to at CMU, whether that be our tech people who are amazing and they didn't even know what was going on in the fall. And the fact that we were moving to the spring would have also like possibly lost us our tech people who like make the show essentially. So it's just looking at all the possible logistics, who's comfortable, if CMU is even allowing us, all that stuff kind of really, we pushed it to the last minute. That's all I could really say because we wanted to have our in-person event so badly.
Talk me also through a little bit of your board restructuring. I'd love to understand changes you've had to make, and then also, did you kind of create any new positions now that you're in this digital, like streaming almost service of a competition?
Basically, every team-related position became obsolete as a result of going virtual. So things like our operations chair did day of show operations, our liaison chairs, our mixer chairs, and our after party chairs all became basically like not relevant anymore because they don't exist. So the way we restructured our board was essentially we didn't really kick anyone off. Obviously, we basically just told them we had a form sent out and we said, this is your preferences. Like these are the 4 or 5 different areas where we can take on another person. We're looking for 2, maybe 1, because things have increased in those areas. So tech, we asked a couple people to come onto Tech House because they're going to be involved with all the stitching and making sure everything's perfect and taking in submissions, things like that. And various other places had different amounts of commitment changes. So from there, people gave their preferences. We assigned a sort accordingly. And then there were people who really didn't want anything other than what they had. So instead, we made them our liaisons per se. And we said, basically, once these teams basically register up for this showcase, we can actually assign them as we would normal liaisons and kind of just, engage with them as a board to these teams. So we'd have right now we have 4 board members as liaisons. So those homies we'd put in as liaisons for these different teams. And from there, we'd be able to have them engage with these teams and get to know them better and understand how they're doing during COVID, what their restrictions are, just so that we make our bonds strong throughout
I
this
danced
community.
at Mela back in the day, and Mela was always positioning itself as a best of both worlds, right? It's a very good Bhangra experience and it's a very good fusion experience. What's kind of the brand for Mela this year going virtual?
Yeah, I think our entertainment value has always been something that we heavily emphasize, not only to teams but also to our audience. I feel like that's the memorable aspect of Mela that everyone that comes to the show can think back on, is the fact that our dancers always feel like they're fully supported when they're on stage by a very enthusiastic audience. As far as anything taking a hit, I don't necessarily think anything has. I think that's something that we'll probably find out come Mela weekend when it's virtual, and we'll see what the audience interactions and reactions are. But I think overall we want to keep it the way that it's always been, as fun as it's always been, and offer our virtual stage the way that we offer our in-person stage in Marchand, with the same level of enthusiasm that our board has always had when hosting these teams in Columbus. We just want them to have a good time and be able to showcase their talent and feel as though we're all very happy to see their performance. But I guess that's once again something that we're gonna probably find out once we have a virtual competition.
So one question that we've asked everyone, a sense of when things will get back to where we were pre-COVID. When do you think that's going to happen? And what do you think, based on your experience, is going to need to happen for us to get back to that environment? And if it's going to change, what do you feel is going to be permanently changing?
So personally, I don't really think anything is going to go back to some sense of normal until at least next year's dance season in the spring. Especially for us, we bring in about 400 dancers. I think last year we hit our record of 435 or something. So that's a lot of people to cram into one hotel, one venue, one mixer space, all of that. So I feel going forward, one thing we've never really enforced in the past is having roster caps, because we really just wanted to invite anybody and everybody who wanted to come with the team to come and like experience Mela. So I feel like that may be one thing going forward that they have to keep in mind. And I know this year also we toyed around with the idea of like limited audience. How could we maybe host a show with no audience? How would we filter teams in and out with masks, keep it like all clean? But I think the biggest issue that we came down to, the biggest question that came into our minds was just because we're considering each team as its own entity, teams are made up of multiple people. And if all those like 20 to 30 people aren't comfortable with being with each other without their masks, being that close, being in those like smaller spaces, then like it's not fair for us to ask that and treat them as one entity either. So I feel like that's something that may have to come more so from the team side. And I know we'd done a lot of monitoring on social media of how teams were hosting tryouts, how they were hosting practices, talking to them, seeing what they were doing, where their headspace was at. And so I think the change or like shift back to normal, I guess, would have to come, at least for me, from the team side, and see that like they were comfortable with it, they wanted to do it, and we're just platforms for them to express themselves on at the end of the day. So I feel like that's at least how I think it would go in the future.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's easy for us to just like adjust our plans and host teams in any way, but it's up to them. They're the ones visiting Columbus. They're the ones that would come here, live here, and spend the weekend here. So we don't want to like rush the process and force anyone to feel uncomfortable coming here just for the sake of competing and for the sake of like having an in-person competition. I personally don't really see anything improving with this pandemic situation until next spring at the earliest. And even that I feel like is pretty optimistic considering where we're at right now. So I think this is definitely a process that might take longer than one competition season. But I'm hoping that like if we as a like circuit and as multiple circuits can perfect this process now, then it might be something easy to replicate next year, maybe even next fall if like teams and competitions need to.
Right. And has the collaboration between competitions and kind of the sharing been in a good space? That's something that feels to me is very much needed in terms of navigating these uncharted waters, especially if we're now talking that potentially spring of next year, it's still going to be an impact too, right?
I definitely think that the circumstances of like this past year has made this whole circuit and like all of these competitions so much closer. And like personally, I directed Mela for Mela 13 as well. And like the change in between being willing to ask competitions questions and like have meetings and discuss in depth what our plans are and being willing to like collaborate and help each other out, it's so much greater given the circumstances now. And the support has been great. We've had competitions wanting to meet and talk and like pitch ideas back and forth and see like what we want to do, and to feel the support of other like teams, competitions, and people just like that want to see us succeed. It makes us feel much better going into this process.
And finally, here's Sunny to talk about what it's like to deal with COVID in the real world.
Of course. So everybody that's listening, hello. My name is Sunny. I go by Sunny Singh. And my artist name is Sunlight Sounds, DJ Sunlight. And I represent a SoCal Indian-based event entertainment company called iDJ Productions. And we absolutely love what we do. And in the midst of all that, I'm just a studio bedroom DJ that just puts together a bunch of mashups and Bhangra team mixes, and somehow here I am, yeah.
Yeah. So, Sunlight, we are going through this process of, obviously the world's been impacted by COVID, and it's been impacting a lot of different industries. It's been impacting competitions. Are you still currently DJing and working today? And if so, how many events do you typically do?
Are we talking like during COVID right now, or what we were supposed to be doing without COVID being here?
Well, let's talk about what you're doing in COVID right now. And
yeah. Okay, so at this very moment, we're doing like 95% house backyard weddings, outdoor weddings.
Okay.
I have the first time we were back in a ballroom was on October 4th, Saturday, and it was the craziest feeling ever. It had been like 6 months, like pretty much on the dot 6 months since we had been in a banquet hall, half the guest count, but otherwise it's just been like a lot of drive-bys. The fun thing was we started a cool little trend. We didn't start it, we saw it. I got it inspired from the news, and I saw some people on Instagram just driving by a line of cars,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we hit the homies up and we were like, you know what? Each of these people's birthdays, we were just like, let's do a drive-by. And, a lot of the friends and teammates were in. We, threw all the stuff on a truck, drove it by, music blaring. We bought double players. That was fun. Started a little buzz with the Indians. And that was pretty cool. And then otherwise, if I'm not at events, I've just been more so in like studio mode, like DJ,
Right.
Mix making mode.
What's kind of been like the capacity? Like, how many gigs do you normally get this time of year, and how many are you doing right now? You mentioned that there's been some sort of effect from COVID, right?
Yeah. Oh, a huge effect, actually, to be honest. We were supposed to be in the midst of wedding season right now, guns hot. Still. Actually, no, you lose track of time. Now we're in October, right? You know what? We would have still been in wedding season, though, which is crazy. But now we're getting...
And you know what? Indian weddings don't stop, man.
No,
it just keeps
they're
going.
all year round, exactly. So what happens is we're doing roughly 4 events a month, and those go from either like maybe 1 month we'll do like 3 wedding barats, and then one backyard graduation or backyard birthday. And mainly they've been no more than 50 guests. We've done a wedding where it was like maybe 120 at 5-ish. But that too, I mean, we were far away from them, and it's crazy as packed as it is and as questionable as it becomes, right? Because we hear and see everything going on in the world. I have to make sure when I'm out there, they got to ensure us that, we have 15 plus feet of feet, and that, we're allowed to enforce visually however we, socially distantly take requests. Like, we usually have something there that says text your request to this number, found ways around it. But yeah, it's usually just 40 guests and under. Done a few weddings where it was literally like just 20 people, 10 from the guys, 10 from the girls.
So from like a contract perspective, walk me through like some of the contractual things that have changed, right? Like, how have you talked to your clients, and do you also like work with the state or like the venues? Did the venue pass guidelines? Like, what's happened in that environment with your work?
So we only work now in specific counties. So in LA, I mean, it's been pretty rare that we've done an event of anything close to, where we live in LA. Nothing's been close to home. It's all in like the Inland Empire.
And why is that?
Because they've started lifting up the policies over there. And the cool thing is that the city is definitely, what happens is it's like the banquet halls that have to deal with the city, because at the end of the day, they're the real estate behind the whole event. The event happens there. So they have to get all their regulations in check, because they're the place where all the vendors are coming together. So within that, they haven't breathed down like specifically into industries within events, right? So it's just mainly like, hey, banquet halls are shut down. That means events are done, right? And then what happens is they do these like uplifts or what like reopenings, and then the banquet halls, start saying, okay, you know what, we'll take, X amount of guests we can have in the as occupancy, and this many goes to our staff, this many can go to the guests. So anything at like a venue style ordeal, it has definitely been safe. It has been in the open, but then there have been clients that have done events at their house. And sometimes those ones get kind of uncomfortable. But having said that, I'll be honest, we passed up a lot of gigs as well. So that's a contractual and a business side to it that has changed.
What are some of the rules that you've seen that they've added to combat COVID and reduce the risk of a possible outbreak?
So one thing is I have seen people do assigned seating now, where it's like by families or more so by households, because
Right.
that whole theory, everyone in that household, they're with one another. So I've seen people do it by households. People releasing tables to the bar. Another thing is that back then, it was open buffet, right? Like you have the how do you say karchi in English? The spatula or the spoon, right?
Right.
That thing,
Yeah.
you do it yourself.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. This time, there's waiters on the other side, and they're doing it. And the way that little tava thing is made, like it closes and opens. So they're doing a great
Yeah.
job on that. Or assembled food. All vendors have masks on. I haven't really seen any vendor that doesn't have a mask on, and if I did, it would be weird.
Right. You don't want to be around that.
Yeah. So
Talk to me, you mentioned a little bit about being nervous
Yeah.
before the first couple times you went for your gigs. What's it like going to a gig now? Like, what was the experience before? What is it now? Just walk me through like a typical gig now during the COVID time and what you go through.
we show up, and we'll show up and we set up everything. And for some events too, like I'll let the client know, like, hey, look, you know what? I like made a mix before like coming here, like a nonstop mix catered for your event, and I'm gonna leave that running, and we're just gonna wait out front, or like in our car or something like that. If we're far enough away, it's fine, but we set up early sometimes, and then we'll go out, get our lunch, eat it, and then we just, some clients, they're also homies, but we'll tell them, let us know when you're ready to proceed, and we'll come in and we'll come and kill it. Otherwise, we show up, typically set up everything, and then we're just there. It's just in one spot. Before, you'd want to go around, check more things out, whatnot. But now it is more like business up until I get to DJ, because when I DJ, sometimes for me, DJing is therapeutic, and it's business, and it's it's fun. So that's where I let it all out. But the setup process, everything else, definitely, I try to be as following of the rules as I can, where I'm just there in my own place. My cousin comes with me too,
Right.
and so it's also his family that I also have to take in consideration. He has grandparents at home. So we're out here, trying to get it, but we're making sure we're doing our part, And I will be honest, science or whoever, these doctors that are saying, wear these masks, even if you're around people that aren't wearing masks and you're wearing masks, we know you're still a level of protection further than you would be if you had no mask on. So,
Yeah.
like I said, all has been well so far, and I'm trusting what they say. I've even talked to a doctor before, because like I said, there was an event that happened, and somebody tested positive for that event, and we DJed that event the day before. They got their test that morning after, and you'd be surprised how many people hit me up. It was kind of like a moment of realization for me too during COVID season, that how many people had reached out, and some were doctors, and one who I had specifically talked to, she's a childhood friend of mine, and she definitely did an amazing job to calm me down, because I was also panicking. I was like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
it's airborne and this and that, and when you start retracing steps and all of that. So I definitely was a little paranoid. I'm glad to say that those 2 weeks that passed, nothing happened.
Yeah. And tell me about that one specific event where that person tested positive. We talked briefly about that on the phone, but could you walk me through what that incident was like and what happened afterwards
Yeah.
where they tested positive?
Yeah, so it all happened so quick. That's the best way to start the story off. The day of that event, actually, I got the call, and he was like, "Hey, bro, we need a DJ, but it's tonight." And like I said, I just started a new job, so not too many specifics about this part, but I found a way to make it happen. Right? I made it happen. I called my cousin, And God, I really hope they don't hear this. I don't think they ever would. But yeah, I called my cousin. We made it happen. We ran out there. We set up everything. And I never thought like, hey, why are they calling me the day of? I knew there was possibly another DJ that did it. I didn't think to ask. Like I said, it was all happening so fast. We get there. We set up. The homie that's doing like the event production or like, the decor and all that. He tells us like an hour into our setup, that he was like, hey, if I were you, I'd stay away from the guy in the, wearing that outfit. He pointed him out with the mask on. I was like, oh, why? And he was like, word has it, he tested positive for COVID. So there was already a rumor circulating, right? So me and my cousin literally looked at each other and we're like, why is he here? So I was really concerned about it. Texted the client. And again, I know this guy pretty well too, like for a while. Texted him and I was like, hey, can we speak real quick? And he was like, he called me. He's like, is everything okay? I was like, yeah, just come to my DJ booth when you get a chance though, like at your nearest convenience. So he comes on over, and so through that, that's why that other DJ didn't go.
Okay. So he found out and he was just like, I'm not going to do this.
He had somehow found out, and he told them he wasn't going to do it. I didn't get to ask him. I spoke to him a day after though. Again, everything happened so fast. So I spoke to him when he approached my DJ table, the client, and I was like, look, man, this is the word on the block. And I just told him, I was like, look, even though, it was like a good 67, 70 mile away gig. It was far, but we're used to it. We do a lot of far events. Like a 60-mile away gig for us is normal. So I had told him, I was like, look, you're a homie, you're a brother. Like we go back. Like, is it just cool if I pack up and go home if that's the case? He's like, oh no, like that's not the case. Like he's like, see, what had happened was, and then a story was explained, but an assurance was given at the end, like a guarantee that, like there should be no issue for somebody out here testing positive for COVID-19. Looked at my cousin too, and I was like, hey, is that answer okay with you? And I was like, my bad, client name. I just want to make sure, my team is okay about it too. And like out here, people know, like fun fact, I'm going to keep mentioning my cousin. My cousin comes with me to all my gigs. I don't do any gigs alone just because with the price I give, there's something I offer. I need I need a recap of each event, and I post that on social media, and I make sure all these things are like, portfolio. So clients have something to look at. So anywho, he was okay with the answer. I was okay with the answer. I had my mask on. Some people attending the event had masks on, some didn't. And what happens is, the night progresses, and the next morning I get a text from someone. They go, hey, groom tested positive for COVID-19. He just got his test this morning. And I was like, wow.
Oh my God.
So I was pissed. And the thing is, that's the groom's brother. So they all live in the same house. I talked to the groom. Groom didn't have a mask on. I shook the groom's hand sanitized after. Like, I'd be doing that. Like, if anyone's listening to this that can recall shaking my hand at a gig after COVID lockdown, yeah, I sanitized my hands afterwards. So what? I love you guys though. But yeah, so I definitely I was scared, and I told my brother I was upset. Like, I was so upset. Like, with my new job, I had to just sign out. Got me screwing around with my job so much, right? I had to like sign off for like 2 to 3 hours. I was just like, I was looking for a COVID test. All that shit was packed. I was freaking out. I was for sure freaking out. We watched the news, everything. I'm sorry. I'm not COVID. I'm not ego COVID where I'm like, oh, I don't care. I'm definitely scared. I assure you, there's always a moment where I'll stop, halfway at a gig or after. I'm like, please God, let us be okay. While we're risking our lives working, anybody, after COVID, I have no enemy, man. Like, the last thing I'd want to hear is somebody, has to expire from this virus that I know, and that would hurt, because it already hurts so much to hear about all these people that have lost their lives.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Bhangra Podcast. Be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please help us out by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts and Podchaser, as that really helps others find the podcast. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all of them at the Bhangra Pod. If you want to know what else is going on in the podcast world, Sign up for our newsletter and join our Discord server to get exclusive content you won't get anywhere else.